This is the Dean Abbott podcast. Today I'm talking with Amy Maris. Amy is a mother and grandmother, the author of the novel Never Say Uncle under the pen name Amy Shore, which is available on Amazon. And she is also a curious theological thinker. And today I'm talking with her, and we're doing a jazz episode, which means we have only a theme. We're going to improvise around that and see where it goes. Amy, how are things going for you?
Well, I really can't complain. I live in a great country. I live in a beautiful home in a nice neighborhood. I have a husband who loves me and children who love me. And sometimes when I get on Twitter or X, I think the world's going to hell in a handbasket. But when I come home to my kitchen, I'm in a warm, safe place, and I'm very privileged compared to many women can't say that.
You are pretty active on Twitter, I think, and that's an interesting juxtaposition of life on Twitter versus life in your kitchen. I suppose in your kitchen, there's no one there trying to say the most outrageous possible thing for attention.
On any given day, it could be my husband and I trying to do that to each other, but it's usually friendly.
Good. And on Twitter, tell me a little bit about how what you read on Twitter interacts with the primary questions that you're wrestling with now. Well, first of all, tell me the primary question you're wrestling with. What you were just telling me, but you need to tell the audience too.
The thing that I'm really trying to figure out is what is the modern woman's role in the world, and I think I'm fighting against a little bit it's way more than a trend, but women have wanted to be men. I think the idea of that things would be better for women if they could only be like men. And I find that false and hollow and even revolutionary and not helpful for, number one, for children, and not helpful for women, and not helpful for men, therefore not helpful for the world. So it's not quite that.
It's also at a level misogynistic in its own way, right? Because it's sort of suggesting that women are not okay as they are.
Exactly. It's as if we've lost our core, so we're running after someone else's.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you see some of that on Twitter?
Well, I see it everywhere. I mean, it's in commercials, it's in movies, but I think Twitter, the thing about Twitter, it will be forever Twitter to me and not X. Sorry, Elon. But it's so immediate. You can get somebody's thinking in the moment, and they may not exactly mean it, or they may change their mind, but you get what somebody's thinking right now, not last week, not tomorrow. And so it feels like you're hearing, if you look broad enough, you have followers, but if you look broad enough, you're going to get what people are thinking all over the world about a variety of things. And that's fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm. I was talking with someone yesterday about one of the things you see on Twitter, if you pay attention at all to the gender discourse, is it's very clear that liberal feminism, as it has been, is dead. And that the very idea that you're complaining about is over. Okay, so the idea that men and women can only be equal if they are the same, which is the the core notion of liberal feminism, or that I sometimes call sameness feminism. That's dead. I think that that has been more or less discarded by every serious well, maybe not every serious female thinker, but a large number of serious female thinkers who are active in public discussion now seem to me to be questioning that idea a great deal. And I think, too, the rise of trans ideology has actually put liberal feminism under quite a bit of pressure, because I think it has raised for many women the question of essentialism, and that essentialism being, there's something at the essence of a female, and there's something at the essence of a male. There is an essential femininity versus an essential masculinity, and that if we have arrived culturally at a place where that kind of anti-essentialism and sameness feminism has essentially put women into a position where they no longer can have their own shower rooms, etc. I think many women suddenly have become much more open to questioning that core premise that there is nothing essential about being a woman. And I think you see that a lot now on Twitter among younger women who are questioning that hard, and it has led, in a way, to a rejection of liberal sameness feminism and a search for something else. I mean, do you see that?
Definitely, definitely. I think, though, that the ravages are everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's it may have stopped up here with the thought, but it's infiltrated all the way down to the lower levels of system everywhere. It's in every part. It's in still being, it's infiltrated the schools, the teaching in the schools, and
You mean
just the
liberal
way,
feminism?
yeah, just the idea that a woman's always got to kind of step on a man to get where she wants to go. And a lot of men, just anecdotally, a lot of men are still feeling very discarded by women because of it. And that's caused, I think, a depression of masculinity. And so maybe it is the fact that the tide is turning, but the wave is the wave is still there, and maybe that's what I'm feeling.
One thing that I have noticed over the years on Twitter is people who are not active on Twitter don't know this, but Twitter is actually the place now where all of our mainstream culture kind of comes from. That what are now ideas that are now emerging into the mainstream were thoroughly discussed on Twitter 7 years ago. And so I think a lot of times the conversation on Twitter is so far ahead of the mainstream that you can kind of predict where our culture is going by what's being taken seriously on Twitter. And so when I look at Twitter and I see, like I was saying, a lot of younger women who are serious and who think well, kind of rejecting that liberal feminist notion, the core notion of liberal feminism, I know that in a few years it will be widespread throughout the culture.
I like that prediction.
That's my prediction. So the question is, and what we're doing today is trying to think about what would replace it. What
exactly.
So
exactly.
What's your answer to that?
Well, I think that is the job of a woman, to create and replace. And it's and I was thinking about how I would describe myself, and I've been realizing, especially through the work of Jonathan Peugeot, who's a symbolist, very good at explaining symbolism. that my personality is, and my life has been a lot like what you just, as you described this podcast, jazz. We're making it up as we go. I don't tend to have a lot of, I'm very high in openness, so I don't have a lot of intense focus, and I will kind of follow where my energy goes. And I think that is, it's not necessarily an inherent female trait. But I think probably the very best way to figure out what a woman should do is in the context of a loving family relationship. In general, there will be women who, I think they will be on the margins, but I think that trying to find who you are somewhere else besides in your own home is a fool's errand.
Why do you think that?
Because of the nature of men and women and the family being so essential to the survival of the race. And so biologically, it's safer for everyone if we're in a committed relationship with caring for children. And I think that going too far outside that, if let's just say it's not sustainable, it's unsustainable over the long term for many women to carve kind of a maverick path.
But what are you seeing as the connection between the necessity of the family and the individual woman's understanding of her identity and role? How are those things connected?
I think it's because it's hard to find identity without connection. Identity isn't just a standalone, I am this object. It assumes that the female is an object and not. So I think our essential nature is connectivity, needs connectivity.
Why? I mean, well, let me ask it this way. Is that sense of mostly finding yourself within the context of those connections, do you think that is part of that essential core of femininity? And is that something you think is different between men and women?
Yes, probably it's stronger in women, the relational side. I mean, we've been told, I've read, I haven't studied biologically, but I think that's
what
true.
Is your experience, though? And you've spoken to other women, and what have they said to you? Have you found that to be true for yourself and among your friends?
Oh, definitely, yeah, no question. Women are relational. Either their girlfriends, their husband, their children. That's it. That's everything. And I see even in my my little grandson, the way that either if my husband watches him or I'm watching him, my husband's going to he's going to let him wander a little more, or his dad's going to let him wander a little more, and the moms will be saying, you should go out there with him. You should, you just see it. You see it all over. I've seen dads out, that the men, the boys and the men do need and want to have a separate kind of, it's not identity, but a different kind of goal, a different kind of goal in life. And I know that's stereotypical, but stereotypes are there because
they might be true.
Certain things often exist. Yeah. So
you say your quest is to understand the role of the modern woman. And you even said the modern conservative woman. Why the modern conservative woman? What does that have to do with it? What do you mean by a
because
conservative woman, first of all?
uh, okay, what do I mean by the conservative woman?
Uh-huh.
I think by that I mean a woman that's not necessarily attempting to break up ancient patterns
Mm-hmm.
unnecessarily, um, because I think there is kind of a because I don't think that a liberal woman cares or wants to know in the same way. They do want to know, they do care, but they don't. They're not asking. They don't seem to be asking.
Okay, so then the question is, if liberal sameness feminism is at its core built on a false premise that we think is dying, why has it been and continues to be to a certain degree appealing to women?
I think most women feel that they could, at their core, I think they understand that they have an innate intelligence that's different than men. And I think that it's easy to dismiss men, especially if a man isn't doing what you think he ought to do or the way he ought to do it. And I think it's self-preservation too.
Okay,
I
so
think that
let's you've said many interesting things all at once, but
all right.
let's pull them all apart a little bit.
Yeah.
You say you think most women feel deep in their core that they have an intelligence that's different from men's. What is that? How does it function? And how is it different from men's in your perception?
I think it's intuitive, and I think it values different things because it's supposed to. I think that's the way it's designed.
Mm-hmm.
It values different things, and I think a lot of women are afraid too that their interests will not be protected. Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of damage, over the last few decades. There's always been damage, but moving all the men to a job and moving all the women to a job has essentially made people afraid that they don't have a safe place.
It made women afraid that they don't have a safe place, as in a family.
Right, and as a society.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So
I think the Industrial Revolution has kind of blown up all of that. I think it's a long time coming.
How are you connecting? So are you saying that women have a kind of intelligence of their own, which they feel like men dismiss? And because they feel like men dismiss their intelligence or that faculty, which you're referring to as an intelligence, because they feel like men dismiss that, therefore liberal feminism has been appealing to them, in the sense of it is in some sense rejects men or suggests to women that men are unnecessary in their lives or something like that.
Yeah, you can't trust them. Mm-hmm. We can trust each other. We can help each other. I mean, women are. I think women know. We know we're vulnerable, and we don't want to be. But that's probably one of the finest qualities about women is that they're vulnerable.
And I think that is really at the core of the shift we're seeing in thinking about gender, especially on the right, is that I think that many of the women thinkers and writers I was referring to on Twitter are very interested in no longer pretending that is not true. Mm-hmm. Because liberal feminism has required women to pretend that their vulnerability is less than it is.
Absolutely.
And I think there's a shift going on. See if you think this is true, where women now see that vulnerability as essential to who they are, and also it also, I think, forms a sort of moral ground from which they now, rather than reject men, are inclined to demand more of men. And so let me say that more clearly and you can respond. That if women, that under sameness liberal feminism, women argued, or liberal feminists argued, that men and women are the same. And they denied, to a great extent, the inherent vulnerability of women. And so, therefore, because we're the same, we should be treated the same under law, in organizational policy, in interpersonal relationships, etc. But I think now so the liberal feminist answer to dissatisfaction with men on women's part was to create a world in which women did not need men. Right? So women are dissatisfied with men. Women have there are reasons that women don't trust men, etc. And so therefore, let's create a world in which women are not dependent on or need men. And to do that required downplaying their level of vulnerability. What I think I see emerging is a different argument, which says exactly what you were saying. Women are inherently vulnerable to men, and the strong, the less vulnerable, should protect the more vulnerable. And so rather than to create a world in which women are independent of and don't need men, we should create a world in which men are obligated to care for those more vulnerable. And I think you see that, again, on Twitter a lot in certain circles. Do you follow this account called Radfem Hitler by any chance?
Sounds familiar, but I'm not, I wouldn't be able to recall anything from
Well,
it.
she is, she's outrageous in her tweets, and a lot of it I think is satire, but one of the points she continually makes is that essentially men simply don't put enough effort into caring for women. And I really think that she probably is one of these kind of cutting edge. She's definitely not a liberal feminist, but a kind of cutting edge thinking about gender that has in it very traditional elements expressed in very contemporary ways without being one of these sort of neo-patriarchalists who only talk about women's submission, etc. I know I invited you on here as a guest, and I'm doing a lot of the talking, so I apologize for that.
I was hoping that would happen. No, because I love what I feel this thing happening with you on Twitter, that you're chasing after the men and you're whipping them in shape. And I'm reading it and I'm trying to figure out, because I don't know specifically who you're thinking of or who you're talking to. I don't quite know the situations, but I'm like, yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. And I guess what I want is a corollary for women.
Okay.
I guess, which maybe that might be the inherent feminism in me saying, well, the men have this, but I love that you're saying, okay, guys, this is how you treat a woman. Who's telling the men that? You don't want to hear the guy that's saying, we hear those.
Right. It's so interesting because many of those tweets that I write about male-female relationships or whatever, I am aiming at men. I typically don't write any tweets to tell women what to do, right? That's not my, that's not really my place. And it's not something I'm, I'm not really equipped to think about that very much from women's perspective. When I write those tweets, the vitriol that comes back to me is incredible. Because many men are so profoundly scripted in their own victimization, and they really have been victimized in many ways by liberal feminism. I agree that there is a crisis in masculinity brought on by the adoption of liberal feminism by all of our mainstream institutions. Okay, so the school system, the government, the media, the educational, the higher education system. When all of those things uniformly adopted the liberal feminist line as unquestionable orthodoxy, men in those institutions suffered. Period. And they were victimized, and all that's bad, and that's well established. You can look at the research or whatever. The and I think in response to that, the red pill movement grew very powerfully online. And beginning really in the aughts, I think I became aware of kind of the manosphere in maybe 2007 or something. So I've been following it to some degree for almost 20 years. And in some ways that helped men, right? Because the goal of the manosphere, especially the early manosphere, was to help men try to figure out how to function and flourish in this society dominated by liberal feminism and these institutions which were enforcing that on men and really creating situations that were terrible for them. The problem is that over the years, that has really shifted more and more from an emphasis on male self-development to an emphasis on men's victimization. Because as it grew, it became more commercial. And now there's lots of money involved. And I think the stoking that anger gets you clicks, and clicks get money.
Well, that's a feminine move too, essentially. So they've, come back to we're vulnerable.
Right. And so
it's not going to work for them.
When you do what I do, which is to tell men that they can lead, right? That they are called to be a king, that they are called to greatness. A lot of these guys are so conditioned to hear any call to greatness as an attack, right? Because they're just so conditioned into what you're talking about as that sort of they're like real hardcore alpha males who have this very feminized mindset of I'm a vulnerable victim, don't ask me to do anything.
Well, it's almost as if both sides are screaming, I can't have a decent life because of you. You're messing it up. Men screaming that at women and women screaming, whoever started it probably started in the garden, but using someone else as an excuse for my not living my best life, it's not going to get you anywhere, but it sure feels good.
So what is it that you think? What do you know at this point in your quest that younger women need to know from either older women or more enlightened women about the role of the modern woman in society? What do you know so far?
What do I know rock solid is that women need to say no to men when they're inappropriate.
Okay.
They've not said no, they've thought they should say yes,
They feel an
because
obligation to say yes.
feminism told them that they could do anything they wanted, and so they said yes to sex at any time, and essentially that, because that's what usually gets you in a vulnerable position. And they haven't they haven't said no to the men in their lives, and so because of that, the man becomes weak because he gets whatever he wants. He has no hurdles. Life is, easy. And then she gets pregnant, or then she has an abortion, and then that doesn't lead to a better life
Mm-hmm.
in the way that she had thought. And so that's what my book, Never Say Uncle, is about: a girl who meets a guy and she learns how to say no to him. And because she says no to him, he gets his life together because she's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes actually from a period in my life where I had to do that, where I had to learn that. And it also comes from way back, my favorite book, which is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte.
Uh-huh.
And my second book is a sequel of Jane Eyre. And to me, what Charlotte Bronte did is she showed how a vulnerable woman in love said no to the man who asked her to live with him as his mistress. And so probably saying no is the first thing.
Mm-hmm. Well,
but it's not easy.
Why is it not easy?
Because women love men. We need them. We love them. We want to be taken care of by them. We want to live alongside them. We really don't want to be alone.
Right. Yes, I think I think that is a truth that all of these red pill guys who freak out in my comments all the time, that is something they don't understand. They don't understand the degree to which the average woman holds men as a class naturally in a how women as a class are naturally disposed to hold men as a class in a very high level of esteem.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with that?
I totally agree with that.
Go ahead. Say more.
The older I get, the more I love men.
Mm-hmm.
The more I get, dirty, grubby, crude, crazy men. We have to have men like that. Mm-hmm. We need them. We really do. And I prefer to think of myself as a feminist,
mm-hmm.
because a true feminine, the true feminine spirit appreciates and responds to the masculine.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're afraid of it because we think we've got to make it all the same.
And so because women as a class are naturally disposed to hold men as a class in high esteem, a lot of female rage comes from their disappointment that men do not behave and comport themselves in ways that are consonant with the esteem in which women naturally hold us.
Right. That's the whole reason for the anger. It's because there is an ideal, and we know it's there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Everyone knows it's there, but no one wants to. We're kind of trained out of believing it.
Yes,
and have been for decades.
Yes, there's a wonderful passage at the beginning of C.S. Lewis's essay called The Weight of Glory, in which he basically says this, right? And he says, there is this thing inside you, which your entire education up to this point has been designed to convince you to deny. And you can call it romanticism, you can call it nostalgia, you can call it childishness, but it doesn't matter because there is this thing in you, this knowledge of the ideal, right, that will never go away. And he makes that exact point, though, that our institutions are captured by an ideology that is based on trying to convince you to deny that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is probably, again, part of the reason why these red pill guys are so vitriolic is because I am telling them to, I'm holding a lot of the things I write, hold them in all of their misery and failure against the ideal which they inwardly know is right.
Well, nobody wants suffering.
Right. Yeah, sure.
But
And
suffering is
that's
the only
required.
way forward.
Right.
I can't tell you the gems that came out of watching my daughter and son-in-law suffer through the loss of their child. You would never, I would in a million years never have wanted them to go through it. But what they gained from going through it with an open heart towards God and towards fate and towards the universe is unimaginable. And it's only been 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
That trial made something of them.
Mm-hmm.
And we just don't want, I'm addicted to comfort. So we don't want anything uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so the men, I think what's going to happen with a lot of those men is they're going to get rejected by a lot of women.
Right.
I know this is true.
Then reinforces their victimization, etc.
They just say, well, they're just, they just want me to be their baby daddy, or they,
Right.
So yeah, it's going to be like that for them until they answer some hard questions.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thanks for doing this today, Amy.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, Dean. Appreciate it.